welcome back to Just the Sip, tongasmic wine exploration and adventure with me, your hostess Norma, and co-host
Carla Sabaka.
And we have, this should be familiar because if you didn't watch episode 7, stop right now, go back to episode 7 and watch, because Clay was our guest on episode 7. And in a continuation, sort of, we are going to talk about the most important thing you want to hear in the month of November, which is
Movember.
And
Thanksgiving.
what pairs with turkey and ham? And we are going to answer those very important questions when we get back with Scene a Few. Here at Mortson Winery, and we are going to start off talking about the most important wine options in the month of November, because you should be thinking about what you're going to pair your turkey and or ham or whatever meal with wines. Very important. And this will give you enough time to order them. And as a bonus, as you order them, 20% will go back to the Movember charity. So let's talk about the first wine we have here today. Clay?
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is there's never any right or wrong with food and wine pairing. You like what you like. It's what makes the world go around, the subjectiveness of it. I think when we're talking about, how acids pair with acids or acids pair with fats, there's things that tend to work better, but drink what you like. Do what you like.
Okay.
So
That was acid.
Acid, as in, so I learned wine pairing through Charlie Palmer, which we're going to talk about when we get to the last wine. And one of the things that Charlie taught me that I think is so valuable in pairing wine is think of it as parallel or perpendicular.
Okay.
So if you have a fatty wine, you pair it with a fatty food. So something like that would be a really buttery Chardonnay to pair with salmon. The opposite of that is taking that same fatty salmon and pairing it with a high acid Pinot Noir. So you want to work either in parallels or in contrast.
Gotcha.
And it's why the wines that we have on the table today are so well paired with the Thanksgiving meal. Now, if you happen to cook primarily for your Thanksgiving, there may be something else you want to do differently, but we're thinking more in terms of turkey, ham, and the normal accoutrement.
Thank you. Well said. All right, then let's jump in. I love this rosé. It is 2003.
2023.
23.
That would be a really old rosé.
Yeah. Let me get my bifocals working. Okay, good. 23.
This is a rosé of Zinfandel. Not to be confused with the White Zin, although we could technically call it White Zin. It is an absolutely stunning rosé.
Yeah.
We often joke at the winery that rosé and Sauvignon Blanc we often refer to as a window to a winemaker's soul, because everything that you do, and most importantly don't do, to an aromatic white like this manifests itself very readily in the glass. And what our intent with this rosé is to give you the purest expression of place and varietal with absolutely no human intervention, with no manipulation. So we pick an entire vineyard for this rosé. It's all Zinfandel. We pick it usually about 3 o'clock in the morning. So by the time it gets to the winery, it is still nice and cold. It goes directly from the picking bins to the press. And kind of another way of illustrating that is we joke that the only maceration that this fruit gets is the drive from the vineyard to the winery. So it goes directly to press. We're not holding in the press. We're not spinning the press. We start the press cycle immediately. We only press it to about 140 gallons per ton. So normally Zinfandel, especially for a rosé, would yield 170 gallons per ton. We only really want the stuff that comes out naturally and easily from the press. The other 30 gallons, we ferment that separately, not necessarily to blend back, but to sell on the bulk market, a whole other story. So that 140 gallons per ton goes into a stainless steel tank, and this is where the purity aspect comes in. That is it. There is nothing else done to it. There's no yeast added, there's no oak on it, there's no malolactic. It spends its entire life in that one stainless steel tank. And what's significant about that is it is fermented and aged on its primary lees. And I think that's one of the things that's so unique about this wine, but makes it so great to pair with a meal is, on the nose you have this vibrancy. You can tell that it's high acid, low alcohol, beautiful fresh fruit. It's almost like an underripe red fruit characteristic. So underripe cranberry, underripe raspberry, underripe strawberry, whatever you smell. But what's amazing is it has a phenomenal texture to it. And that texture comes from all that lees contact. Beyond that, it finishes like you would expect, 12.5% alcohol, 7 grams per liter, no sugar. There's this lean, really vibrant vein to it. And I always describe Emma's winemaking as she creates wines that have an energy. There's a focus to them, and this certainly embodies that. But I just love how it's so dynamic with food. And again, go back to the parallel perpendicular analogy. Turkey is a lean meat. And so the fact that you have all this acid and this really focused wine could pair really well with that. The flavor profile of rosé is very light. It's not overbearing. And then also the things that kind of go along with the turkey, tend to be more fatty, right?
Yes.
So let's think about our gravies. Let's think about our mashed potatoes.
Yes.
Let's think about our stuffings. The acid in this cuts through that beautifully.
Yeah, this is just so nice and crisp. I just love this. Wow. I guess, again, like you said, preference, but I'm thinking, how do you think the ham would go with this?
It probably wouldn't be my first choice, to be honest. I think
More for
I
the
want
turkey.
something with more body and more texture with the ham, because even though it's a single cut of meat, good ham's going to have some fat content to it, some marbling. So I want either something heavier, and we can talk about that with the Chardonnay and why the Chardonnay is heavier, or the Pinot that's going to have tannin and acid. And it's an important conversation around winemaking that one of the few levers that winemakers have to pull is texture.
Right.
So we can build texture in wines. The question becomes, how do you build texture and why do you build texture? And so with the rosé, we want to build texture as minimally interventionist as possible, or minimally invasive as possible. In white wines, which we consider our rosé to be, you can build texture through oxidation, you can build texture through use of oak, you can build texture through malolactic. And really, we're not doing that with any of these. It's the least contact. And that's another lever we have to pull. It tends to be the least impactful, but you taste it in that softness.
So is that why you utilize a steel containing unit instead of like an oak barrel?
We like the steel because, first of all, no oxidation. And so again, back to texture. You can build texture through oxidation, but we love, look at that color.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Am I supposed to keep a straight face? There's not only is it really light, but because it is essentially a white wine, if it's exposed to oxygen, think about what happens when things are exposed to oxygen. They tend to oxidize, they turn brown, right?
Yeah.
We would see a very different color on this. So we want to ferment it in an anaerobic atmosphere, but we still want to have some texture. So if you committed to fermenting in stainless steel with no other inputs, then least contact almost by default becomes your way of building texture in the wine.
That's interesting.
Well, cool. Well, then let's move on to the Chardonnay.
Absolutely. So Chardonnay, again, let's think about that notion of texture, right? Is Chardonnay just tends to have more body than Rosé or Sauvignon Blanc. Some of that is grape related and some of that is traditional winemaking. So this is fermented in oak. You're automatically going to get some oxidation through that. We only use about 10% new oak, so we're not trying to build texture through a whole bunch of wood sugar and wood protein. And we also allow this to go through malolactic, not fully, but this vintage we're about 50% malolactic conversion. And what that means is we're allowing natural bacteria to convert the natural malic acid in the wine into lactic acid in the wine. And we always hear about lactic acid, people that are lactose intolerant, or we think about lactic acid as the acid that's prevalent in dairy products, which is absolutely true. It also is an acid that has more texture and is softer. And trust me when I say every red wine you've ever drank has gone through malolactic conversion, and it's an enjoyable experience. It's not an enjoyable experience if you drink them before they've gone through malolactic. Yeah. So malic acid in the presence of tannins creates this really kind of unholy marriage, and so it's why we want to convert malic acid to lactic acid. Chardonnay, I love this Chardonnay. I love Russian River fruit. Is this for me or for the glass?
Either one. If you think it'll, hey, yeah.
I don't think it's going to stay.
I figured if we could go like wine by wine.
Wine by wine. Okay,
I can't leave you guys out of the hat club, right?
So, Russian River Chardonnay, it's cool enough in Russian River to allow us to retain acidity. And to me, you can't have a balanced wine if it doesn't have acid. And when you think about Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, two varietals that are from the Burgundy region of France. One of the things that makes that area so prolific for those varietals is it's cooler, and so we want to source our Chardonnay and Pinot Noir from cooler climates. It helps to retain that acid. We build texture on this through oak. So not only is it oxidizing through the oak, we have about 10% new oak, and then we end up with about another 10% of 1 and 2 year old barrels. So there still is a little bit of oak flavor being imparted on that. But you have all the lees contact that you had in stainless steel because we don't rack it off that. And then with a Chardonnay, we actually agitate the lees. And so we're going in and stirring the lees. What that creates is a wine that has phenomenal acid on the finish, but so much texture on the entry. So this to me is more of that parallel, kind of pairing that we look for is something with more texture, nice roundness from all that, malolactic and wonderful oak nuance that is really going to go so perfectly with turkey. And to me, it's like an all-time classic pairing, Chardonnay with turkey.
Right.
I love the flavor profile that Chardonnay tends to be citrus. Sometimes to me this has a little bit of a green apple, a little bit of pear, but I like to think of wines in terms of color spectrums, and these are lighter color spectrums, which turkey's a white meat, so it just kind of works.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts?
I love that you said about the 10% oak and then like the 2-3 year barrel, because I think I am so biased for buttery aftertaste, right? And that comes with more of that oak, right?
Yeah. Oak and 100% malolactic.
Yeah. Right. But I love this.
Yeah.
Right? I think, as you said, like pairing this, and I'm going to pretend like this is not a lamb sausage, but it's actually turkey. I think it's going to be fabulous pairing
Well,
turkey.
it'll work because of the acid.
Right.
The acid will allow it to work. So when we think about the influence, when you stick your nose in a glass of wine, just my humble opinion, your flavor profile should not be dominated by oak flavors.
Right.
You should have primary fruit flavors.
Yes. Right.
If we're talking about bourbon, of which there's plenty in this room, that is almost all in terms of color and flavor profile. So much of it comes from the oak.
Right.
This is a different animal, and there's a lot of very successful brands out there that put 100% new oak on their Chardonnay, and what you smell is what you expect to smell. You stick your nose in the glass and you think of creme brulee, and you think of butter, you think of brioche, wonderful flavors, but they're not true to the grape. And so we want to strike that mid-balance where you actually taste the Chardonnay fruit, but the oak is complementary to it.
Right. Do you tend to get your barrels from France, Ben?
We only use French oak.
Yeah.
Not because I think it's necessarily better. I would much rather always support American industry. The challenge is it's just not what works best with our wines.
Yeah.
And that's really the only thing that comes down to what works best with our wines and our winemaking style. And for us, it's French oak. And the difference isn't so much as, it's different species of oak. So Quercus robera versus Quercus alba. It really has to do with terroir.
Yes.
Why is Dry Creek Zinfandel different than Lodi Zinfandel? Why is Napa Cabernet different than Paso Robles Cabernet? It grows in a different environment. And you think of where the typical oak forests are in France, it's in much cooler regions. And then you think about Appalachia here in the United States, very warm, very wet. And when you have a warm, wet climate, everything tends to grow really quickly. And when things grow quickly, the grain width gets wider. The slower something grows, the tighter the grain width is. And that is what the difference is between American oak and French oak, in my opinion. Very little to do with the species, everything to do with terroir. The slower that something grows, the tighter the grain width. The tighter the grain width, the more slowly that the wine penetrates the wood. And so therefore the flavor profile tends to be much more elegant, much less impactful than you get out of American oak, which the wine penetrates very quickly, extracts all those compounds very quickly. Not better, just different.
Just different, sure. Yeah.
What I like about it is it kind of evokes like a pear taste in
Yeah.
my mouth, like a crisp, fresh pear, which
I
I really
100% agree.
yeah.
Like to me, pear, like when you pair it to an apple, it's such a clean flavor profile. But pear, just based on the texture of the fruit, there's almost a gritty, a sandiness when you're eating a pear.
Yes.
But that gritty sandiness almost has its own flavor. And that's what I get out of this, is there's a very like terroir, mineral driven aspect of this wine that 100% agree is like, you know, a fresh pear.
Yeah.
So if you've watched in the past, Clay has been very generous with his time and his profits, because as I said, he is selling these 3 bottles, and I'll get the other one out here in just a moment, but I want to put that Chardonnay up there too, as a 3-pack or a 6-pack. And when I say 6-pack, that means 2 of these, 2 of these, and 2 of these, right? And a 12-pack. Do the math. And so out of those, under the URL that's Movember, they are generously donating 20% to the Movember charity. And I'll talk a little bit about that after we get into the Pinot.
Perfect.
Which now I will transition the bottle over here. One of my favorites.
So, and my favorite singular Thanksgiving wine, and I say singular because it's hard for me. Like we never have one bottle on the table during Thanksgiving. We don't not only that, but we would never have one varietal, meaning 4 different Pinot Noirs. To me, a great Thanksgiving meal is having a bottle of rosé, having a bottle of Chard, having a bottle of Pinot, letting people kind of try this with that, the stuffing with the rosé, the stuffing with the Chardonnay. What do they like better? And of course, we're always going to have a bottle of Zin on the table.
Of
but,
course.
To me, if I had to pick one, if this was my desert island Thanksgiving wine, I would go with Pinot Noir. I love it because, again, I like the acid, the lean, the focus. To me, it cuts the turkey, but it also pairs better with the ham. And, you know, obviously I'm partners with Chef Charlie Palmer on this. You know, one of the many things Charlie is famous for is his Pigs and Pinot event, because his personal feeling is that Pinot Noir pairs absolutely flawlessly with pig. And so whether you're talking about a pork chop or a ham, I think Pinot is the wine of choice. And having, you know, more body. I mean, look, it has tannin, it has anthocyanin, it's got more structure. That allows it to go with things like stuffing, especially if you have a sausage-based stuffing. I mean, that's kind of the fun of Thanksgiving, is everyone has their different, you know, recipes.
I'm a green bean casserole.
You're okay, so there you go.
That's my dish.
And I think that this just, it's so dynamic with what, and this one specifically, so this is the Sonoma Coast Pinot Noir. We make 2 different Pinots under normal circumstances, and when the conditions are absolutely perfect, we will make a reserve Pinot Noir that we call the Duelist. But when I think about Thanksgiving, it's the Sonoma Coast, because Sonoma Coast, a little higher in acid, a little bit actually lower in body, but our Russian River Pinot sometimes can be too big in a, you know, phenolic standpoint, that it kind of overwhelms, again, that white meat, that light flavor profile of turkey. So I like the Sonoma Coast, and when you're thinking about at home, cooler climate Pinot Noirs would be something that in general, we hope you use ours, but
Get the 3-pack.
get the 3-pack, but
6-pack.
cooler climate Pinots are what I think of with that singular wine for Thanksgiving.
Yeah, no, nice. I love the way that you brought up Zins. And normally we would have a Zin with it, but this year's a little bit different. We decided to go with the rosé
Yeah.
and a white.
Well, and technically it is a rosé of Zinfandel, so
Right,
you
yes.
can
So
still have
technically
a Zin on the table.
it is Zin.
Yeah.
Technically.
Do I get to wear this now that I'm done with my wines?
You can.
I
Yeah.
can keep track of where I'm at.
Yes, you can. The trick is keeping it on.
Ah,
See, I got the easy
slow,
one.
steady movements.
I got the easy one.
I mean, I think this wine is in a perfect place right now. Probably the most common question I get about wine is ageability. And I always tell people it's one of the most subjective aspects of wine enjoyment is its ageability, because some people want something that is barely a year old. They want it fresh. They want it vibrant. Some people don't even want to think about drinking a wine until all the primary fruit is gone, and what's left are all those umami flavors, that kind of mushroom, forest floor, and the tannins are almost silky. It's so light on the palate, and there's everything in between. I prefer to think of great wine in the shape of a plateau, not a bell curve. So great wine should look like a plateau, because there's always going to be a lead up period. Like, how long does it take the tannins to come into resolution? Where do all those components, the major components, the acid, the tannin, the fruit, when are they perfectly balanced? So that's the kind of front peak of that plateau. And then how long are they going to stay there? And the reality is they're not staying static. They're just degrading or evolving at a similar rate. And so when I taste this Pinot right now and I smell it, I think we're a little bit past the front edge of that plateau, because having tasted this a couple months ago going, oh my God, it was wonderful. I'm seeing that evolution that I love about wine. The flavors have gone from like this ultra bright Bing cherry, pomegranate, cranberry,
Very fruity.
to they're like evolving into like a more of a mold flavor profile, like mold as in mulled wine, not MOLD, MULLED.
Thank you.
But there's like this just really wonderful savoriness about it, and you're actually starting to see some of the spice of the varietal come through. So I get like this amazing baking spice, almost like a spiced plum, and that's that evolution of that flavor profile. And the tannins, I mean, it's Pinot Noir, it's never going to have a lot of tannin, but there's just this silky nature on the palate, yet unbelievable acid on the finish. It is in a sweet spot.
It is a wonderful, wonderful wine.
Speaking of aging and ageability, we are in your family library.
Yes, sir.
All these wines go back about 7 generations, right?
I wish I could say that they go back 7 generations. What we have in here was really kind of a passive explanation,
Aggressive?
understanding. Passive aggressive.
No.
We have at least one bottle of every wine we've ever made. Now, I started the winery 25 years ago, so even though my family has been growing grape for 7 generations, we've only been making wine for basically the last half generation. So there's a lot of really special wines in here. There are also wines in here that are not wines that I've made. So I like to, you are the company you keep, as they say, or the guilty by association. And, we don't ever think of our brand as limiting ourselves to who we compete against. I know that sounds kind of funny. A way of saying that is, I don't want to be the best winery in Dry Creek Valley. I don't want to be the best winery in Sonoma County. I don't even want to be the best winery in California. I want to be considered amongst the greatest wineries in the world. And I know that is an audacious statement, but I go back to the fact that we have been farming here for 7 generations. My family owns some of the most spectacular vineyards in California. So I truly believe we have the opportunity to make wines that stand on that global, of the highest quality wines in the world. So not only do we keep every single record, every single bottle of wine we've ever made here, but we also like to keep wines that we drink from around the world, and whether that's other great local producers or great producers from Italy or France, because that's where we want our wines to be compared. Is not just the best that Sonoma County has to offer, but the best that the world has to offer. And how do you really know where you're at in comparison if you aren't trying those wines on a regular basis? And I think that's a really important part of the wine industry, is it's constantly evolving, it's ebbing, it's flowing, styles are changing, but the true, iconic brands at the top, they stay the course. They have the house style that they make, and that's where we want to kind of fit in. So that is what this room houses, is most importantly, literally there's one bottle of every wine we've ever made in here, which is pretty damn cool. And then we keep some other, wines that we like to compare ourselves against.
It's like at capacity. I love it. This is how my cellar is going to look here soon.
I'm glad you could say that, because I have a 48 bottle wine fridge at my house. That is what I have.
Well, you'll just have to come to Alaska. Speaking of ageability, if I may.
Oh, go ahead.
So if I ordered the 12 pack, then
Yes.
how long are you suggesting? I always feel like the rosés and the whites should go sooner than later, but you can keep your whites for a couple years.
Yes. So one of my favorite questions. Look, we all have different financial constraints. We all have different storage constraints. When I buy wine, and when I recommend wine to people to purchase, one of the things I tell them, understanding those first constraints, is that try to buy in increments of 6 or 12. So here we're talking about buying in increments of 4, 3 different wines, so pretty damn close.
You did the math.
I did the math. So the reason I say increments of 6 or 12 is one of the most fundamental aspects that makes wine unique is that we put a date on it. We often overlook that, right? How many things that you consume on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, you know exactly where it came from and exactly when it was made. And the date is so critical because that's what allows us to track its evolution or its age. If there's no date on it, I don't know how old it is because it doesn't matter.
Right.
And age does matter in wine. So with the rosé, let me back up for a second. Great wine is not something someone ever sells you and says, you need to drink this in the next 12 months. Nor is it something someone sells you and says, you need to put this away for 10 years. Look, we're not guaranteed tomorrow, and we also shouldn't be forced to consume something because it has such a short lifespan. So to me, a great wine is something that drinks wonderfully early and then will evolve with grace. So let's talk about the rosé because it is stunning right now. I mean, it's absolute
wonderful
perfection right now. And how can you expect that to age is that some of that primary fruit is going to subside. Right now it's got a lot of acid. The acid is going to soften. It's going to pick up more texture as it goes on. But just simple, call it, biology, it doesn't have the same preservatives that the other wines have. I mean, I'm not talking about, unnatural. I'm talking about things like tannin, anthocyanin. Even though it has high acid, it doesn't have the same body that those other components have, or those other wines have to help it age.
Right.
So to me, we've opened plenty of bottles. I mean, you can see some old rosé over there. That's the beauty of having a library, is educational, right? I mean, we open some old rosé and they drink wonderful. They're very different than what they are today. So when I think about this, to me, the optimal drinking window is probably 3 years.
Okay.
Chardonnay, a little different animal. Again, you have more body there, more influence from the oak because it's 100% in oak. We also are getting the advantage of oak tannin. And even though it's only 10% new oak, you have some seasoned barrels, so that's kind of the 2 or 3 year old barrels, and it is extracting tannin from that oak. And tannin is one of those preservatives we were talking about. So it's not the same as the skin tannin that's going to be in a red wine, but it allows this wine to age, coupled with the fact that it's from a cool climate, it has a high acid, another factor that's going to allow it to age longer. So it's already 2 years older. Remember, this is a 2021.
That's right.
But I smell and taste it now, and it's so bright, so vibrant. So it has already aged for 2 years, and I think it really has another 5 to 7 years ahead of it. And at that 5 to 7 year mark, you're definitely going to see some changes. The color is going to change from that kind of really fresh straw, like just when straw turns from green to yellow. This is yellow, but has a little bit of green on the rim. It'll go from like it'll look like really old straw, and that's part of that change. And it'll just taste softer and a little bit richer. Pinot Noir is going to follow a very similar time frame, but maybe add 3 years to it. So instead of saying it has 5 to 7 years left, I would say it has 7 to 10 years left. Everything I'm saying is under the guise of subjectivity.
Sure.
We like what we like it how we like it, when we like it. So there's no right or wrong in how we age the wines. But back to the original notion of having 3, 4, 6, 9, 12 bottles of something. It gives you the power to make the decision for yourself. Because I can tell you that I would wait 2 months to open your first bottle, but in 2 months, open your first bottle of rosé and take a mental snapshot of everything about it. We call that your wine memory. And so make a wine memory of that. And then open another bottle in 6 months and kind of go back, recall that memory, and see how that wine has changed. Now, a lot of people will take notes on it, whether that's digitally or they have beautiful notebooks that I've seen. That, to me, is one of the great joys of wine. And it's why I tend to only buy things in 6 or 12s, because buying something in a 6, I'm going to open a bottle very youthful. I want to understand that wine in its youth. That first bottle I open is going to give me an idea, when should I open the next one? Should I open the next one in 6 months, 12 months, or maybe wait 24 months? And then that second bottle, all I'm doing is plotting points on data, right? And so once the more data points we have, the stronger that graph is going to be. And eventually, if you're plotting it qualitatively, something's going to change and you go, you know what? that last bottle wasn't as good as the one I had before. So guess what you do now?
Drink it.
Drink them all.
Drink it.
Right? And I always say, like, when you reach that point where you just think, how can this get any better? Drink them all. Because guess what? There's always going to be another vintage. And I don't mean drink 8 bottles in one day. I mean, open a bottle a week, until they're gone. Or open them, make a point that say, you know what? I've got 4 bottles left. It is now September. I got 4 months left in the year. I'm going to open a bottle a month because I want to enjoy them at their peak.
Well, going back to continuing on and keeping on, what I know a lot of things have changed in the winemaking industry, probably throughout the generations of family. But is there anything perhaps passed down or traditions that you guys keep regarding winemaking, or is there any wisdom?
Well, lots of wisdom. I would say institutional knowledge is irreplaceable. And so when we look at our farming practices, my dad he'll never retire, but my dad's not involved in the day-to-day, operations of the vineyard anymore. But you can't devalue what his 74 years have seen and what he's experienced. And, my grandfather before him, my dad has basically taken all of that knowledge and incorporated into what he did. And my brothers are taking that from him. So when I talk to my brothers about farming, I'm not just getting their information. I'm getting my dad's information that he passed on and the grandfather before him. It's helpful to have the direct resource in my father, who's still around. So those things are invaluable. On the winemaking side, I started the winery, so there wasn't a legacy or expectation or history of winemaking that I felt I had to adhere to or kind of fall in line with. We got to create our own from the ground up, and we had a very succinct understanding of the style of wine that we wanted to make that was passed down through generations, that this is what we drink at our dinner table, being Zinfandel. These are the types of Zinfandels that we like, being things like Raffinelli and Ridge, that have always been a little bit more full-bodied, a little bit more structured than the fruity style of Zinfandels. And so that's what I was raised with. So in many ways, that is my legacy. And maybe it's not a technique in winemaking, but it was an expectation of style that we wanted to make because that's what we drank for generations. Answer the question?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Do you have any ancient vines out there that you know?
Well, the sad part of our family history, as you know well, your
Sorry.
listeners may not.
Episode
is that
7.
We lost all of our property to eminent domain in 1968. And so we homesteaded our first piece of property in 1868, planted vineyards very shortly or immediately thereafter. So in 1968, we had hundreds of acres of vineyard that were 100 years old, and we lost all that. So had I had that today, we would have plenty of 150 plus year old vines, but we don't. So to answer your question, the oldest vines that we farm are pieces of property that we have purchased that had existing vineyards on them. So yes, we have some 85-year-old vineyards that we use. We own the land now. That wasn't our original dirt. And back to our original dirt, this block that surrounds the winery right here was planted in 1971, and so it's a 53-year-old vineyard. So it's pretty special.
That's my vintage.
That's your vintage? There
That's
you go.
my vintage.
It's a good one.
Right.
But I caution people in referencing age of vineyards. So I want y'all to think about this, and this is going to sound very funny, but think of it through the lens of insanity. Because insanity is often described as doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So now think about the question. Is something good because it's old, or is it old because it's good? And
Insane in the membrane.
I would argue it's always the latter, because if you farmed a shitty vineyard, can I say that online?
Yeah, we just did.
If you farmed a really crappy vineyard, you would be insane by allowing it to get old.
Yes.
Right? So the only reason anything is ever allowed to get old is
It's the
because
good
it's
stuff.
good.
Yeah.
So
Right. So 3 packs right here. We've got the Rosé, Chardonnay, and the Pinot Noir. Trust us, they're amazing. They're going to pair perfectly
amazing.
with whatever you're having for Thanksgiving. And if you do want to go with the beef or whatever, contact the winery here. They may be able to substitute something out. There might be
Yes,
a
absolutely.
change in the price, but it's possible, right? And they've been really great about that. And if you see something else on their wine menu, they may be able to mix and match for you, which is super fun too.
100% willing to do that, but I promise you, if you put these 3 bottles on your Thanksgiving table, you are going to be a rock star. You're going to have a very happy friends and family.
Now, I would be remiss if I did not talk about Movember. And a lot of people, when they hear the word Movember, think, why are you pronouncing November with an M? Because the charity is called Movember with an M. The rest is Ovember, right? So Movember. And this is the world's leading international charity for men's mental and physical health. And when I say physical health, for a long time I said men junk, but I'm going to say the words right here. You said shitty, and I'm going to say prostate and what's the other thing? Oh, right, testicular, right? So those cancers, we talk about breast, women can talk about breast and breast cancer forever because we've been talking about it for like 30 years. Men typically don't want to talk about that stuff, right? So this charity wants to open up the conversation, because if you're a man and you have a prostate, at some point in your life, you will probably, unfortunately, get prostate cancer. Mm-hmm. So this charity is doing research now how to prevent prostate testicular cancer. And what goes along with that is the mental health and suicide prevention. So it is a wonderful charity. I'm so thankful that you have sponsored and supported this and my endeavors in trying to make people more aware. So I think this year I brought you a shirt.
Oh, wow.
Your own Movember
It only
shirt.
took me 5 years?
It only took you 5 years, but I'm here now because before it was all online. And
that's awesome.
Clay would work up through the month of November for the Movember 3, 6, 12 packs or 24 packs. And during his Thanksgiving time would allocate live shows.
Yep.
And we would go through the tasting. And so I am thankful to give him his Thanksgiving weekend back, but give you the entire month and the opportunity all the way through November 30th. Yep. They're honoring this. If you mention Movember or use the Movember link, they will automatically donate 20%, which is wonderful. So, Clay, thank you for supporting such an amazing cause.
It is our pleasure, and obviously I believe strongly in the cause. I'm a huge proponent of prevention. We kind of refer to that as, medicine 3.0, right? Been really good at, addressing acute, injuries and needs, and we have not been good at figuring out how to prevent other things.
That's it. Go get a PSA, gents. It's very easy. Personal question,
Yes.
and that's my last one. Are you right nose dominant?
I am.
How did you find that out?
I'm a winemaker. I mean, 27 years.
And so you were like, wait, I'm not smelling anything here. I got it here.
Yeah, so I am definitely right nose dominant. So this is my typical stance when smelling wines. I will switch over, but I definitely get more aromatics when I use my right nostril. And
Okay.
I think some of it could just be physics. I think my right nostril is
Well, you
bigger.
did play sports for
I've
a long
broken my
time.
nose
Yeah.
so many times
Right.
that it is a little bit skew, and so my right nostril is physically larger than my left nostril.
Okay.
I don't know if I was born that way because there's been too many things that have happened to it. But I think we all probably have a nostril that we smell better out of.
Well, like left eye, right eye
Yeah.
dominant. I mean,
Exactly.
left hand, right hand, left hand dominant, right?
Yeah.
So that happens.
This
Any-
is my favorite one. It gets clogged the least.
Does it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any parting
That's a
questions?
big part of it, right?
This is your free time to ask any question. Clay's really good about answering. I've asked him the most random questions in the last 5 years, and he's always been so great about answering it. Now we have a show.
What Morrison family wisdom would you like to bestow upon our viewers for Thanksgiving?
That's a big question.
Ooh,
Morton family wisdom.
wow. You
I
thought
would-
I asked hard
I
questions.
know. That's a big one. I would say that I'm so thankful for, the way that my parents brought us up. It wasn't always easy, but it's not supposed to be easy. And, as a parent of 2 teenagers and a grade school child, and having coached for almost a decade, and so interacting with a lot of young kids, I think we are in a phase where parents have this desire to be their children's friend versus the parent, and that's a problem. And I think we need to get back to being strong role models, teaching our kids what work ethic is, what manners are, what discipline and structure look like. It does not mean that you can't love on them endlessly, but we got to get back to that. And that's something that was instilled in me, through my parents. And it wasn't always perfect, no, there's no such thing as a perfect family dynamic. But I'm at a point now where I can look back on my life and understand the things that my parents taught me passively and very directly, and how that's impacted my life today.
Wow. I believe that's wisdom we all can learn from and live by. Family, friends, and,
Yep.
And everything that ties that
Hard work.
together, except
Hard
for
work.
anyone under 21, is wine.
yeah.
Amen.
Cheers to that.
Cheers.
I am like, cheers, Clay. I am like so impressed you've kept your little hat on this whole time. That is awesome. Hey everybody, thank you for watching this special Movember Thanksgiving edition of Just the Sip. Happy holidays to you. Join us in Mortson Wine and in supporting Movember. Get your 3, 6, 12, 24 pack. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you all for having me.
Hello, this is Carlos Vaca from Just the Sip podcast, and I will be shaving my mustache in November. When Norma sent me the email asking me to shave my mustache for pro-state health awareness, I said to myself, well, as an American, that's definitely something I can get behind, because I'm very pro-state. So this one is for you guys. Oh shit. One sec, homies. Gotta lube up. That's Axe body spray, no, that's not gonna work. Each whisker saved, or each whisker shaved, is one prostate saved. Can I get an amen? Time for my back. Just kidding. Anyways, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, it's definitely important to make sure that as a man that you are are healthy, your body's healthy, and so raising awareness about prostate cancer is a very important thing. So if I believe if you're in your 30s or even in your 40s, definitely set up an appointment with a doctor. And it may be uncomfortable, but it is a life-saving procedure if they do catch something early. Take care from Kalaska. Bye-bye.